Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is Dan Richter, an author, and Will Stewart, an actor. Dan Richter was born in Connecticut and went to Kent School. He studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. Then he toured the U.S. as the lead with an American mime theater group. In the late 60s, the young American settled in London. Why did you settle in London?
Well, you know, I'd been publishing some new poetry, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, people like that.
You were publishing it. You were working with them?
Yes, and it was a lot of new work being produced at that time, and I had taken a leave of absence for a year to study mimetic forms all around the world, and along the way I'd met a number of people, and I had enough poetry together, so I published this poetry review, which I took to London, and things started happening there, and I got swept up in the life there, and I ended up teaching and marrying an English girl and settling down. You went
alone. I was going to ask if you went alone. You went with your poetry.
I went with my poetry, and I fell in love.
That was great.
Yeah.
When I kind of was fantasizing that the reason you went to Europe was because mime is so much more important in Europe than it is in America.
That's very, you know, that's very true, Joan. You know, when I go to, even today, when I'm in London, I get great invitations, and everybody wants to talk.
Oh, because you're a star?
Because mime has much more credibility there. But I had no, and I think that's one of the reasons I had settled in Europe. It was
when you were in London. Did you ever get a chance to say study with Marcel Marceau or the Comédie Française, or in Berlin?
Well, you know, one of my research that year that I spent traveling is I very much wanted to spend I spent some time at the Berliner Ensemble as a visiting artist, and also at the Comédie Française, and I audited classes of Marcel Marceau.
Oh, you did?
Jean Lecoq. Yeah. And the Kabuki Za in Tokyo.
Oh, you were in Japan too?
And the Kanzakaikan, the No Theater in Japan. All of which put me in a wonderful position for what I was going to be asked to do by Stanley.
Well, that's what I was going to get into next, because as you were teaching mime in London, I guess you were teaching, somehow that led to your connection with Stanley Kubrick, and that's why we're here today to talk about Moonwatcher's memoir, Moonwatcher's memoir, A Diary 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Yes.
Which you wrote all about the late 60s.
Yeah, well, it happens because...
And you wrote it now, and how did you remember all?
Well, I didn't remember a thing. I just made it all up. No, I'm joking. No, I did a lot of research on the book. I have got over 2,000 pages of transcripts.
In what, 10 years, 15 years?
No, it took a year or two to do the research. I traveled all over. I spent a week with Arthur Clarke in Sri Lanka. I went out to Stanley's home a number of times. And
let's talk about Arthur Clarke. Was the co-writer of the
2001,
of 2001,
yeah.
And he's still alive and living in.
Oh, absolutely. I communicate. Well, I got an email from him yesterday morning. No, Arthur is in his middle 80s, and he's still very, very active, and I've remained friends with him over the years.
So let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
The London beginning. How did you get to Kubrick?
Oh.
Or how did Kubrick get to you, I should say?
Yeah, the thing is that I had produced a poetry reading at the Albert Hall in London. I had been one of the producers. It was sort of a group effort, and with Alan and Andrei Vosnichevsky and a lot of major poets, you see. And we had ended up with 8,000 people coming to this thing. So, but one of the fellows who had produced it with me, John Esom, was very good friends with, this gets long and complicated, but was friends with a friend of Arthur's, and Stanley and Arthur couldn't get the opening of the film right, and they had done a number of work. They said, let's talk to a mime.
Really? So, they thought about that?
Yeah, they said, let's talk to a mime. And so my friend, who knew Arthur's friend, was talking to him one evening, and he said, I know a mime, Dan Richter.
And then you became Moonwatcher.
I did, and you know, I think if I had realized I was going to, I would have been nervous when I went to see Stanley. But I just thought I was going out so he could pick my brains as sort of a friend of a friend. You know?
What was Moonwatcher's story then?
It was the same as it is now. And you know, basically Moonwatcher, at that time, Robert Audrey had written a book, Territorial Imperative, whatnot. The idea was that we evolved because we got nasty and started killing people. And Arthur had written a number of stories which go back to this theme of aliens and people and life forms trying to communicate with each other. And the idea was that these people come to Earth to communicate with us, and they can't, so they pick a species that can evolve, and they put the idea in my head to kill things. And once I become a murderer, our species evolves so it reaches the point where they can communicate with us 3 million years later.
But you have to start as not knowing what a person on Earth, how they move, right?
Don't know anything.
You don't know anything. So so your movements are the movements that a mime might imagine.
Well, the theory behind what we were trying to do was that a mime can act. Some mimes can, particularly the kind of mime that I always did was based, I was actually trained in the method, you know. So all of my movement came out of the acting process rather than formally. Oh,
so that was a different.
Yeah, and so we could play something, you see, and a mime can say, okay, I'm a 3 million-year-old Australopithecine with a pea-sized brain who, you know, likes to whack things with a bone.
Yes,
you know?
and then you know how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you interpret it. You were talking about the research. Did you actually have a monkey as a roomie?
Yeah, I did. I've lived with a number of monkeys. I've always been very interested in animals, and as a mime, we're always interested in how people move and animals move and whatnot. And I'd always used animals for what we call controls, the basis to build characters. And I had lived with a monkey for a couple years in New York when I was a young mime, and I always had a marmoset.
You really did?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, a real monkey.
Real monkey.
Oh.
Yeah. And then during 2001, I spent an awful lot of time to do research, spent time at the zoo. And I also had a van, or what do they call a Winnebago or whatever, moved in next to my studio on the set, on the lot, so that I could keep 2 baby chimpanzees in there so we could be with them all the time.
Oh, so you did do that. When you were making this film with Stanley Kubrick, they were also, is this right, making Planet of the Apes?
Yes.
So, you know, like, which came first? And
well, we did.
You did?
Yeah, we did. As a matter of fact, we had security problems. I can never prove it, but we thought we were being spied upon.
And you have all this written in the book.
Yes.
I started reading it.
We had things stolen. We had masks stolen, parts of our costumes. We had to keep it under lock and key after.
Because you were developing those costumes, evidently. Yes. In a way
you have to understand, before then, nobody had ever done this before.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about
everything just looked like a guy running around in furry pajamas with a mask, Halloween mask on.
But you were running around because you actually started it. So you were running around in this this heavy costume.
Yes.
Were you very physically fit to carry this around?
I was extremely physically fit. And one of the problems is the people that I used, the 20 people I cast and had to train. We ran it like boot camp. I would say to them, you know, okay, run around the field 10 more times. Do 100 push-ups, just to toughen them up. You know.
Why did you wait so long to write this book? I mean,
well, I've never sought publicity.
It's so long, isn't it?
I never thought of myself as well. I've never really sought much publicity, and I've always had a pretty private public life. But you know, I realized about 3 years ago, I was talking to Tom Hanks and at a 30th anniversary screening, and he was going on about saying he'd seen the film over 35 times or whatever it was, and how did you do this, and how did you? And I realized how important this sequence has been to so many people, and I thought maybe I should write it down, what we did and why, you know, why, because I think it's important to people for reasons, you know. And then Stanley passed away, and I thought, oh my God. So I called up Arthur, oh, sorry about that. I called up Arthur Clarke, and I said to Arthur, I've got to write it down.
Well, that's what I was wondering, if you waited until Stanley passed away and then...
No, not at all.
That didn't have anything to do with it.
That wasn't an issue. As a matter of fact, the Kubrick family have been very helpful with the book. You know, I love the man very much, and I
have some pictures in there that I wanted to... hand me the book.
Sure.
And we'll do a little close-up on this. And then I'm going to see... he was a perfectionist, Kubrick.
Yeah, apparently.
Well, you say was a perfectionist.
Yeah, he
right?
was, and I tend to be a perfectionist too. So
it must have been easy. What I wanted to do was find a... I think there's a photo. Is this one of the...
Yeah, that's me as a pretentious young choreographer.
Down on the bottom.
And Stanley is the person I knew with the smile on his face, with a little sort of almost quizzical, whimsical look about him.
You're the clown, then Stanley's in the jacket, and then below it?
That's me.
And that's you again.
That was the formal picture we sent around, so the young choreographer.
Well, Actually, when I started reading, I couldn't stop. I thought, oh, this doesn't seem very interesting. It's all the way back to the 60s. Who really cares? But it just became fascinating, especially the way you were talking about being on the set and having to eat meat the way.
Yeah. Oh, it was terrible. The thing about Stanley is he was always looking for something to make something real, you know, something to, you know, to get the real. And we had to chew on meat, and of course on a set where the temperature is 120.
Oh, that's why it was so bad.
Oh, it was the smell would get in your masks, and the masks were made of very porous urethane, and so the fat of the meat would be melting in the heat, and then would.
It sounds really gruesome, but it's kind of things that people don't have to deal with today. They dealt with it then because it was creating everything at that point.
Yes, yes. And we could have, I mean, Stuart Freeborn, the makeup man who created the costumes, he could have made up phony meat and things like that. But no, Stanley wanted real meat.
That's part of that perfectionist we were talking about.
Well, true. And also, you know, when something's real, you react to the performer will react to it differently. It's like, you know, Helen Hayes wearing the correct underwear for Victoria Regina.
As they say, it makes you feel better too. And I guess he knew it would put his actors in the right frame. Well, you're going to start something new, or you're researching something new because you worked with a lot of projects with John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
Yes. I was an old friend of Yoko's from Tokyo before she had met John and whatnot.
When she was with that other husband.
Yeah.
Kitaro.
Toshi, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, wasn't it? Kitaro.
Yeah, he's a pianist and a composer, a conceptual friend of John Cage's. And but at that point, she was married to Tony Cox.
Oh, she was married to someone else before that? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's...
After... Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tony, and they had just had a baby, and we all lived together in London at apartments side by side, and then she fell in love with John, and they wanted to start doing things all on their own. And
so that's our next book?
Yeah.
That's our next.
It's called Imagine. It centers around the making of the album Imagine.
That's great. Well, we're going to look forward to that, and I'm going to finish reading Moonwatcher's memoir, of the diary, inside the diary. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dan Richter, for being with us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Joan.
And thanks. Don't go away, because we'll be right back with Will Stewart. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with Will Stewart, who was just telling me that he was born in Cambridge, grew up in Cambridge, and we're really happy he's on the West Coast now. He appeared in a lot of films like Training Day, Mr. Holland's Opus, and his new one, The Dog Watcher. But he also guest starred on TV in ER, Sex and the City, Nash Bridges, and he's a writer. He wrote Pedal to the Metal and another screenplay. I don't know where to start, Will, because as I went through the list, I saw that you wanted to direct, you wanted to write, you wanted to act, and I don't know what we're going to do. What are you going to be when you grow up?
Good question. I don't know, but luckily I have so long before that happens. I don't have to,
you can
do
worry
about
these
it today.
things.
Yeah.
But what do you prefer doing?
Well, I really, both writing and acting satisfy such different things in me. You know, I find that a lot of people talk about acting as sort of a creative process, but it's not creative in the sense that you start with nothing and you create something.
Because you are something, right?
Yeah.
As an actor, you are a person.
Yeah, and you're given a character, two-dimensional. But with painting, you know, you start with a blank canvas or a book. You start with blank paper, and you create something. So for me, the writing is purely creative, and the acting is a different kind of a magic.
Did you go to school, to acting school?
I didn't. I studied at Harvard for 3 years and dropped out unceremoniously.
You did?
Yeah, to move in with an actress in Topanga Canyon.
Oh, that's what brought you to LA?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
I dropped
good.
out of school, and I wasn't necessarily planning to be an actor.
What were you studying?
I was studying all kinds of things, oil painting.
Really?
With a woman named Idelle Weber, a wonderful artist, and film history and theory with Vlada Petric, who's the curator of the Harvard Film Archive.
The Harvard Film Archives are great.
And
they
he's
always
fantastic.
have wonderful festivals, don't they?
They have terrific stuff, and I studied silent cinema with him, which was very interesting, and oniric film, the relation of film and dreams.
So you were going to those things, and you had film in your background, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was always interested with it, but I also studied Confucianism and the history of French Revolution. I studied a lot of different things. I'm sort of eclectic.
So you hear you're driving to Harvard every day?
Yeah.
What shall I study this semester?
Taking the bus. Taking the bus.
Oh, taking the bus, not the T.
No, not the T. I was living right in Central Square there.
So what was your first break, though, in film?
The first thing I did was Mr. Holland's Opus. Was the first film I did, but I ended up getting cut out of it.
But how did you get that?
I worked for a couple weeks on it.
How did you get that break?
I auditioned. I had an agent, and you know, someone was nice enough to represent me, or smart enough, or greedy enough, or however you want to look at it. So.
You were in a film, World Without Waves.
Yeah, we shot in Texas last summer. Currently looking for distribution. They've just finished the cut of the film.
And Pas de Deux.
Pas de Deux, another independent film I play the lead in that's also just starting to hit the festival.
And Dog Walker.
And The Dog Walker.
The Dog Walker.
My favorite. No,
That's my favorite. I don't know, haven't seen the other ones. But I'm sure one of the reasons it's your favorite is you're on the screen every single minute of that. How many minutes is it? 98 minutes or 102 minutes, whatever? I mean, you're there every minute.
Yeah, and it was my first lead in a film, so it was really exciting.
Was it tough?
Yes, it was. It was, the hours were long, and that was something I wasn't accustomed to.
But that's independent filmmaking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Basically.
But it was also the most, you know, rewarding experience I'd had at that time. I mean, it was incredibly intense and sort of a community effort, you know.
This film was written by Paul Duran.
Yeah.
Did you help write it?
I did not, no.
So he wrote it and he directed it. And from what I understand, you have a very close relationship. You're good friends.
We are. We've remained good friends. We met on this job, and
oh, you met on The Dog Walker?
Yeah, and in fact, they found me. They were casting it and looking at people all over town, and I was doing a stage reading of a screenplay at a friend's production company. Oh. And I was just reading the narration. Oh,
I thought maybe you had worked together for a while because you seem to be able to understand what he wants, and he, in turn, I think, liked what you gave to the film.
Yeah, we clicked very well, and Paul's a very bright guy, and he's very communicative. He's very good at expressing. I think you get that from the characters.
You did work with several, Tim Hunter and Roland Joffe.
Yeah, Roland Joffe is wonderful.
And Antoine
Fuqua, yeah.
But what styles are they, and how different was Paul in his directing styles?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, working with someone like Roland, who I just admire tremendously, he's the consummate professional. You know what I mean? It's showing up and.
But is there like a personal relationship, or is it just basically working relationship?
That was more of a working relationship, although there have been other directors I've developed closer relationships with. But that's the thing about independent film, is you have that opportunity to really, I mean, we practically lived at Paul and Vera's house for 3-4 weeks.
When you were making the Dog Walker,
yeah. I was there 16 hours, 18 hours a day for, you know, I don't know, it was 24 days straight or something. So.
But it was fast, right? It was a fast shoot.
Yeah, we shot it very quickly, all things considered.
And then say somebody like Antoine.
Yeah, fantastic. He's such a visual guy.
Oh, so you can see different things in these directors.
Oh, absolutely. When you're working, and it's been so interesting for me to get to work with different directors, see the different styles, and then you know, there's always that unknown quotient, which is when you then go see the film, and you try and match it back to what was going on set. So sometimes.
How did you feel when you saw the finished product?
Of Dog Walker?
Yeah, after working 16 hours a day or whatever.
It was thrilling. I mean, it's magical, you know, when something comes together.
Is it what you expect? Is it always what you expect, or does it turn out to be different? Or?
Well, it's hard to say. World Without Waves, I was seeing the dailies. We were getting the dailies flown into Texas, so I had some idea of what the footage looked like. Dog Walker, I wasn't seeing dailies. So
it was just all new when you saw it on the screen.
Yeah.
It turns out to be, oh, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's very exciting. And you know, sometimes these independent films are sort of a labor of love. I mean, just before Dog Walker, I did a film called Left of Center. It was a road movie. It was supposed to shoot for 2.5 months. We were a couple weeks of interiors in San Francisco. Then we were out on the road for a couple more weeks, and it fell apart. We were supposed to make it to Florida, and we ended up flying out of Colorado. It was all over.
Is that right?
Yeah, awful. Nothing ever happened with the movie, you know. And so sometimes you can pour your heart into something and not see any results. So it's always great to see it come
What
together.
about screenplays? You've written some screenplays, and
yeah.
you've co-written. How does that work?
Well, that's interesting. Paul and I collaborated on a spec screenplay that's just making its way around town now. It's I think it's an interesting process collaborating, and I'm collaborating with my girlfriend now on something. We just finished a script together, but I work as a script doctor a fair amount, doing polishing work. Yeah.
Well, how do you get those kind of jobs?
I don't have a literary agent. I work through people I know.
But is that what usually happens? A literary
Usually
agent?
it'll be an assignment, but I work through people I know that know my work.
Tell us what a script doctor is, because maybe our...
Yeah, doing sort of polish work. I sort of specialize in streamlining it and polishing up the dialogue. I think because of the acting background, I can really hear the words.
Then you're writing screenplays, so you're writing the kind of dialogue that these other people want, and so they call in someone like you to be the script doctor.
Yeah, quite often, and the actors will really appreciate that.
And then what happens when you co-write? Who does what?
Well, Paul and I, we did it a couple different ways. It took us a while to finish the script. It was based on a biopic I had sold HBO myself as a story, and we turned it into a broad comedy about the first black NASCAR racer.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember
he's this
that.
real character at the turn of the century, and he accidentally comes back to life, and so it's double fish out of water. It's.
But who actually does the writing? How does the writing happen?
We bounce back and forth. Paul and I would sometimes sit down and write together, and then sometimes we'd go off and write separately.
Like if he's at the computer, then do you give the dialogue and he writes it, or does he add to it? What actually?
I think I usually typed. Yeah, because I think Paul's a little slow on the typing. But I don't know. You'll have to ask him for his recollection, because maybe he did all the typing. But we were very collaborative. We both, wore both hats, writing original material and doing rewrites on the stuff.
You did write a short film.
I didn't write it. I directed it.
You directed a short film. So by the year 2002, you were directing this film that got an award. Yeah, we just started winning some awards in New York, and it was my sister wrote it and put it together. Really? Elizabeth Stewart. She's an actress in New York, and she composed a piece of music. She's also a viola and violin player. Ah. Yeah, and so she composed this piece of music and then wanted to make a film to the music about 3 different women at turning points in their lives. And so then did you go on to write it? Or I helped her. I didn't write it at all. But you actually directed it more so than... Yeah, I just basically, it was nice for me. I just showed up in New York. How long was it? It's about 13 minutes.
Shot on Super 16. It's very beautiful. It's very non-narrative, very visual. It's almost silent.
Oh, Yeah.
So
her music, does she play?
Yeah, she plays the viola. It's 3 instruments, and she plays the viola.
She plays it on the film? That sounds great.
Yeah, it's really an unusual.
Have you thought of using her for any of the music in your things that you've written?
Yeah, generally that's not up to me. If it were, of course, I'd cast her, and I mean, she's amazing. So I would, I'd use her all the time. But I think, but I would love to get her to play. I mean, if I ever had need and I was in the position of hiring.
Are you musical too?
I grew up playing the cello from an early age.
So did the two of you play together?
We have. I stopped playing. I sold my cello to move to Los Angeles.
Oh dear!
Yeah, I had this 1850s mitten vault darkwood cello, and I sold it for a plane ticket to LA. So.
Oh, well, here you are. So I think the final project that we're going to be looking for in your career is something that you'll write, star in, and probably direct.
That'll be
And we'll
fantastic.
have your sister doing the music.
Yeah, and starring and co-starring.
Oh, and co-starring.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's
Will
such a pleasure.
Stewart, I'm glad you got here. And we'll see you next time. You're doing another movie. And I want to thank all of you for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 917. And we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.